Bulger's timely aid. The Marble Highway and some curious things concerning the entrance to the world within a world. The rocky sides of Polyphemus funnel were apparently as well polished as those of any tin funnel that I had ever seen hanging in the kitchen of Castle Trump, so making fast my tackle and taking Bulger in my arms, away we went sliding down the side with the line passed under my arm for safety's sake. It was nearly 100 feet to the bottom, for I had measured off the full length of my line before I had come to the apex of this gigantic cone, and not caring to tumble headlong down its pipe, I proceeded to light a taper and look about me. Ah, dear friends, one can feel that shudder now, so terrible was it, and what wonder, too, for a glance at the pipe of the funnel told me that it was too small to let my body pass through. The agonizing thought flashed through my mind that I had committed a terrible error, that I had mistaken some vast pit for the giant's well, that I had thrown Bulger's and my own life away in mad and unreasoning haste, that I should never reach the wonderful world within a world, that there in that thick gloom must we lay our bodies and bones. Or, thought I, may not the learned master of masters, Don Pham, have made an error himself in holding out the idea that the pipe of Polyphemus funnel was large enough to admit the passage of a man's body? To my almost frenzy I advanced to the mouth of the pipe, and, lowering myself into it, let my body sink as far as it would foot caught at the slio alders, and after a careful examination I was forced to reach the brain-racking conclusion that my faithful Bulger and I had travelled our last mile together. There was nothing for us to do but to lie down and die. Lie down and die? Never. I had noticed in making the descent into the giant's well that its side had much the appearance of being walled around by blocks of stone. With Bulger strapped to my back I would slowly climb up from shelf to shelf until my strength failed me, and then I would wait until I thought old Juliana had come back to gather herbs, and possibly I might make her hear me. In my despair I sighed and clutched my own arms, and as I did so one of my hands came into contact with something cold and slippery having the feel of tallow. Taking a pinch of the substance between my thumb and finger, I rubbed it thoughtfully for a moment, and then a ray of hope broke through the awful gloom that enshrouded me so pitilessly. It Ava's black lead, there could be no doubt of it. It had made its way through a crack or crevice in Polyphemus funnel, and I had rubbed it off in sliding down the side. With this greasy material to rub on the inside of the pipe to the funnel, and also to besmear myself with, mayhap I might yet slip through into the world within a world. At any rate, I determined to make the trial, even if I left some of my skin on the flinty rock. In order to collect my thoughts thoroughly, and that I might proceed step by step in that systematic order so characteristic of all my wonderful exploits, I sat down, and putting my arm around dear Bulger's neck and drawing him up against me, I communed with myself for a good half-hour. Then all was in readiness for action, and to prove to you, dear friends, how careful Bulger was not to interrupt my train of thought, I have to report to you that although a small animal of the rat family came out from a crevice in the rock while I sat there thinking, as one could see by the light of my tiny wax taper, and had the temerity first to sniff at Bulger's tail and then to give it a playful nip, yet the sagacious animal never budged a hair's breadth. Mind hath ordered, now let hands obey, I exclaimed, as I sprang up and began stripping off my outer garments. This done, I clambered up on the side of the funnel, and began to collect a supply of the black lead, which I deposited near the opening of the pipe. The next thing to do was to get Bulger through the pipe ahead of me. To this end I tied him up in my clothing, bag fashion, and began to lower away. After paying out 65 or 70 feet of the line, he struck bottom, and by his loud barking gave me to understand that it was all rigid, that I might make the descent myself. Upon hearing his voice, I gave the line a few sharp tugs. Lai was not slow to comprehend my meaning, and in a moment or so had not only scrambled out of the bag himself, but pulled my clothing loose, so that I might draw the line up again. My next step was to contrive a way to weight myself when the moment arrived to begin the descent, for I felt sure that I never should be able to arrange it so as to slip through the pipe unless something was pulling at my heels. Cutting off about 10 feet of the rope, I made fast one end of the piece to a long piece of rock, weighing about 100 pounds. This I laid near the mouth of the pipe ready for use. But now came the most difficult thing of all. It was to draw my shoulders in on my breast and lash them securely in that position, by which plan I expected to reduce my width IW at least 2 good inches. These 2 inches thus gained, or, rather, lost, might be the means by which I would be able to slip through the pipe of Polyphemus funnel and reach the vast underground passage leading to the world within a world. Putting a noose around my chest, just below my collarbone, I drew my shoulders in as tight as one could bear, and changed the slip knot into a hard one. Then, having made the other end of the line fast to the side of the funnel, I proceeded to wind myself up as the housewives often do a big sausage to keep it from bursting. This done, I set about rolling in the black lead until I was thoroughly smeared with it. There was now but one thing more to do before dropping myself into the pipe, and that was to make fast the weight to my feet. It was no easy task, wound up as I was, with my arms lashed down against my body, but by the use of slip knots I finally accomplished the feat, and sitting down put my legs into the pipe and drew a long breath, for I felt as if I was skewered up in a straitjacket. Bending down, I called out to Bulger. He answered with a yelp of joy that brought fresh vigor to my heart. Now was come the supreme moment, which was to witness success or failure. Failure. Oh, what a dread word is that! And yet how often must human lips pronounce it, and in so doing breathe out the sigh in which it ends. Quickly lowering the weight, I wriggled off the edge of the opening, and straightened myself out as I slipped into the pipe. Had I stopped it like a cork, or was I moving? Yes, down, down, gently, slowly, noiselessly, I went slipping through the pipe to Polyphemus funnel. What did I care how that weight caused the line to cut into my ankles? I was moving, I was drawing nearer and nearer to Bulger, whose joyous bark I could hear now and then, nearer to the inner gates of the world within a world one. But woe is me! I suddenly stop, and in spite of all my efforts to start again by twisting, turning, and shaking my body, it refused to sink another inch, and there I stick. Oh, Bulger, Bulger, I moan, faithful friend, if thou couldst but reach me, one tug from thee might save thy little master. In a sort of a wild and desperate way I now began to feel about me as well as I could with my hands wedged in so close to my sides, but in a moment or so I had discovered the cause of my coming to such a sudden standstill. I had struck a portion of the pipe that had a thread to it, like that which encircles a bolt of iron and makes a screw of it, and the thought came to me that if I could only succeed in giving a revolving motion to my body, I would with every turn twist myself farther down toward the end of the pipe. I could feel that my knuckles and fingertips were being bruised and lacerated by this arduous work, but what cared I for the keen pain that darted from hands to wrists, and wrists to elbows? It was like twisting a screw slowly through a long nut, only the thread in this case was on the nut and the grooves in the screw, and that screw was my poor bruised little body. All of a sudden, by the swinging of the weight, I could tell that it had passed out at the lower end of the pipe. It was pulling cruelly hard on my tender ankles, but I could twist myself no more, my strength was gone. I was at the point of swooning when I heard Bulger utter a loud yelp, and the next instant there was such a strong tug at my ankles that I sent forth a groan, but that tug saved me. It was Bulger who had leaped into the air, and catching the rope in his teeth had dragged his little master out of the pipe of Polyphemus funnel. We all fell into the same heap, Bulger, I, and the weight. Fully 10 feet, and very serious might have been the consequences for me had my fall not been broken by my striking on the pile of my clothing placed directly under the opening, And, dear friends, if you talked until the crack o' doom, you could not make me believe that my four-footed liar hadn't placed those clothes there to catch me. They weren't thrown higgledy-piggledy into a heap either, but were laid one upon the other, the heaviest at the bottom. Having unwound myself and lighted one of my wax tapers, I made haste to cast away the undergarment with its coating of black lead and resume my clothing. Then stooping down, I made an examination of the floor. It was composed of huge blocks of marble of various colors, polished almost as smooth as if the hand of man had wrought the work, and then I knew that I was on nature's marble highway leading to the cities of the underworld which Donpham had mentioned in his book, and I remembered, too, that he had spoken of nature's mighty mosaics, huge fantastic figures on the walls of these lofty corridors, made up of various colored blocks and fragments laid one upon the other as if with design, and not by the wild, tempestuous whims of upbursting forces thousands of years ago, when the earth was in its mad and wayward youth. After a rest of several hours, during which I nursed my torn hands and bruised fingers, Bulger and I were up and off again along this broad and glorious marble highway. Strange to say, it was not the inky darkness of the ordinary cavern which filled these magnificent chambers, through which the marble highway went winding in stately and massive grandeur, far from it. The gloom was tempered by a faint glow that met us on the way ever and anon, like a ray of twilight gone astray. Anyway, Bulger, I noticed, could see perfectly well, so tying a bit of twine to his collar, I sent him on ahead, convinced that I could have no surer guide. At times our path would be lighted up for an instant by the bursting out of a little tongue of flame either on the sides or from the roof of the gallery. I was puzzled for quite a while to tell what it proceeded from, but at last I caught sight of the source, or rather the maker, of this welcome illumination. It proceeded from a lizard-like animal, which, by suddenly uncoiling its tail, had the power to emit this extremely bright flash of phosphorescent light, and in so doing he made a sharp crack, for all the world like the noise of an electric spark. Bulger was delighted with this performance, and on one occasion, not being able to control his feeling, he uttered a sharp bark, where upon apparently 10,000 of these little torch-bearers snapped their tails at me at the same instant, and filled the vast place with a flash of light of almost lightning-like intensity. Bulger was so frightened by the result of his applause that he took good care to keep quiet after this. Stay paranoid, my friends.